Let's face it, soundbars are a welcome step up from whatever comes built into the TV's chassis, but they pale in comparison when considering the clear, detailed sonic image presented by component audio. If the novelty of your soundbar has worn off, or you're in the market for a receiver or amplifier that provides an opportunity to tidy up all those cables in addition to presenting the music you love on hi-fi stereo, Marantz had you in mind when creating the Stereo 70S AV receiver. I'm Jason Methfessel, and I typically review products for the absolute sound that we consider to be options for individuals who are entering the world of foreground music listening. As it's unlikely those individuals will have dedicated listening rooms, it's easy to imagine their stereo occupying the same space as their television. An AV receiver developed for those who are quite content to stop at 2 channels seems right on target. With an interest in prioritizing sound quality, I hope to keep this initial overview brief. That way, if my observations on sound quality are appealing, you can stick around for my notes on the user experience. If not, I haven't wasted your time learning the details about a product that doesn't fit your sonic needs. First off, the hardware. Marantz does not lack continuity in their industrial design. Aside from knobs and button configuration, 80% of their product line looks the same. The design is safe, even, dare I say, timeless, and finished in a way that presents its $1,000 US price tag with integrity. Regarding its size, the Stereo 70S falls right in line with most other integrated amps, measuring a little over 17 inches wide, just under 15 inches deep, and with Marantz slimline design, it slots in around 4 inches high. As the name implies, it offers 2 Class AB powered channels rated at 75 watts per into 8 ohms. Provides users with 6 plus 1 eARC HDMI inputs, 3 single-ended analog inputs, a phono in for moving magnet, optical and coaxial digital in, 1 each, USB-A, an RJ45 network connection, along with both an AM and FM antenna, for those in our audience with an operator's license. Outputs are limited to 2-channel single-ended analog pre-out with 2 sub-outputs and Bluetooth. Yeah. That's right, the Stereo 70S has the option to connect a Bluetooth output device to it. My reference Golden Ear BRX loudspeakers present a relatively complex load for any equipment on audition. With the Marantz, this necessitated the use of a set of speaker cables designed to reduce the inevitable increased reactance they bring to a system. In this case, AudioQuest's Rocket 11 full-range cables offered a nice complement to my BRXs. Keep in mind, depending on the complexity of the load presented by your speaker cable cocktail, your mileage may vary. Broadly speaking, the Stereo 70S offers listeners a gently rounded rendering of the music. A concrete example of this is Alison Balsam's rendition of L'Estro Armonico, transcribed for piccolo trumpet. Many of you are likely familiar with what a trumpet sounds like live. It's an instrument that offers up tight, exuberant, attention-grabbing transients. When played on less rounded equipment that lacks a flat, full bandwidth output, something that's not easy to do and seldom comes cheap, this can become quite fatiguing. Yet, when heard live, I seldom grow tired of listening. So although the Marantz's rounded tonality may sound slightly unreal in this regard, I find it a wise design choice by the engineers. This rounded characteristic provides for easy listening hour after hour. Although lacking that flat, full bandwidth sonic response, Marantz has done well to focus the output of the Stereo 70S in the vocal range, and given its 2 subwoofer outputs, users are free to fill the bottom end of the frequency spectrum at will. Before I depart from my mention of vocal reproduction, I want to touch on 2 recordings I used to draw out an understanding of how wide the bandwidth stretched in this region. The first one I used was I Wouldn't Be a Man by Josh Turner. If you're familiar with Turner's voice, you'll know he's capable of sweeping the basement, and in this recording gets as low as 70-ish hertz. The 70S had no problem rendering this on a level playing field with the balance of Turner's range. This wasn't the case on the opposite end of the spectrum. On a recording of Auf dem Wasser zu singen, sung by Fatma Said, as Said approaches the top of her register, around 1.5 kilohertz, I noticed the Marantz began to gently lay back in its seat. However, the balance of her voice was presented delicately veiled and gently settled in at center stage. Again, those tight, attention-grabbing transients that are often perceived as harsh were absent. So far, the music I've mentioned wasn't overly complex, and here the 70S did well to present a sonic image that was highly plausible and not dramatically vague. Performers were separate and distinct. This lifelike soundstage was presented in what I perceived to be a mildly miniaturized sound space, but not so small that it took away from the musical enjoyment in any way. However, when complexity ramped up, the Marantz was left straining a bit. I noticed this on various recordings, but found it most evident on Tout Cassé. From, hang with me here, Orchestre tout puissant, Marcel Duchamp. I likely murdered that, and I have a terrible French accent. I don't know French, but I tried. The track starts quite simple, and the detail and clarity rendered by the 70S left for an enjoyable and believable sonic image. Then the band came in, and that image got a little smeared. It was still clear there were separate performers, but they were far less distinct. Additionally, the dynamic punchiness was diminished, presenting an almost compressed sound. A characteristic I know is not at fault in the recording. By the Marantz, I found it quite nice. Does it leave something on the table? Sure. For instance, in Welcome, on the album Eden Beach Club by Laurent Bardain, I made a note that read, "I hear a shaker, but does it actually sound like a shaker?" If it did, I find it hard to believe the question would arise. This is not to say the 70S is lacking when it comes to detail and clarity. When listening to Sun Ra's Somewhere in Space from In the Orbit of Ra, the instruments are served up in such a gentle way. There was a warmth and coziness portrayed that felt quite appropriate. Marshall Allen's blasts on the sax can sometimes come across as jarring. Not so on the Marantz. There are likely many of you out there who appreciate when an amplifier gently presents your music on a velvet pillow rather than a silver platter. The Marantz does the former.
I'm Alan Perkins, lead analog designer for MoFi Electronics, and this is the new Master Deck. What does the turntable sound like? Really nothing. It's a table with a very, very low noise floor, really no background noise. You forget wondering if the speed's stable because it's so stable. You're just listening to the music and enjoying it, and I think the purest form you're going to hear.
As I've previously mentioned, Marantz bills the Stereo 70S as a 2.2 channel AV receiver, although it doesn't seem to have a permanent category home on their US-facing website. Back when it first arrived, I found it under AV receivers. When I returned to the site to better familiarize myself with its specs after listening, it had been moved to the amplifier category. Certainly this seems trivial, but I mention it because after living with the Stereo 70S for a while, I too perceived an identity crisis. Admittedly, that perception was likely colored by my stereo-first audiophile mind coupled with my personal choice to abandon video peripherals outside of the TV itself over a decade ago. Quite honestly, this is probably one of the most difficult challenges related to being a reviewer, having to step out of self and perceive who the target market is when it's clearly not me. However, I appreciate this challenge because it gets me out and talking to other audiophiles, and more generally music lovers. And Chief Content Officer Tom Martin is great at shining a light on my blind spots, helping me think outside the box. I bring all of this up because one of the features that prompted me to question who the market audience might be was the 6 HDMI inputs plus an eARC I/O for a grand total of 7 HDMI connections. I got caught up in questioning this because part of me imagined Marantz could have made the sonic characteristics of the Stereo 70S even better had they not been so focused on all the video inputs. This is why I'm hoping to get my hands on the Marantz M1, because I feel it's exactly that. And if Marantz was able to make the sound even better than on the Stereo 70S, it's likely a home run. But after many conversations of me challenging whether buyers existed for this product, the target audience slowly settled into focus. After many conversations of me challenging whether buyers existed for this product, if you're one who has a plethora of video source components and has yet to fall into the black hole of surround sound, The Stereo 70S offers an elegant solution to keeping all those cables tidy by way of a lone HDMI cable handling all the communication to the TV. Please keep in mind, I don't have all those source components, so I can't speak to the user experience when switching between them or how well the Stereo 70S plays with the CEC protocol in this realm, although I'm not particularly hopeful it's a seamless integration. Based on my experience with Bluetooth on the Stereo 70S, there was a rather significant misstep in the handling of that protocol. I start each day at the office with some breath work led by Wim Hof on my phone. Whenever there's a piece of equipment in my listening room with Bluetooth capability, I like to use my stereo for this exercise. It makes it a bit more enjoyable to have a little oral image of Wim on my equipment rack. I get myself situated on the couch, connect my phone to the 70S, and when I start the audio for the breath work, without fail, every app previously open on my phone with an audio signal would start to play. Podcasts, on top of YouTube, on top of Koba's stream, on top of a little Wim Hof in the background. The only remedy would be to force stop every app with audio, power cycle to Marantz, and reconnect. Quite a bizarre and jarring experience, especially for someone like me who makes a point to ensure any and all autoplay settings are disabled on my phone. On the positive side of the user experience, Marantz has leveraged the HDMI eARC connection to offer users an on-screen menu for setup. The OSM was welcomed after a less than stellar experience using the Marantz AVR remote app. The two previously mentioned setup options are light years ahead of the option built into the Stereo 70S, which relies on its tiny 2-line display and 6 knobs on the front panel for navigation. I did make note of the confusing lack of continuity between these 3 setup options. Several settings can only be found in one of the 3 options, an issue quickly remedied by consulting the manual, but still. In addition to the OSM, the video output provides a now playing screen while streaming, playing internet radio via TuneIn, or calling on media from your local server. Although I bemoaned video sources earlier, I do have a soft spot for displays on streamers, and utilizing the TV for this feature seems like a real win. Something else prospective buyers should be aware of is that much of the hardware used in the Stereo 70S comes from its 7.2 channel big brother, the Cinema 70S. This includes the speaker terminals. The hardware chosen here won't work with spade connectors. If your system incorporates speaker cables with banana connectors, you prefer bare wire, or are in the process of building out your system and have yet to invest in speaker cables, this may be a non-issue for you. Going back to the software side of the equation, Marantz deploys its HEOS app to handle streaming. The app offers integration with services like Spotify, TuneIn, Pandora, and Tidal, but has yet to support connecting to Qobuz. Users can also select from the various inputs on the 70S from within the app. As more and more streaming services roll out their own network streaming capabilities, features missed here don't carry a ton of weight with me, but still worth mentioning. Additionally, the HEOS app could easily see features refined or added via a simple OTA update. Absent a server, I do prefer to stream with Qobuz. With the 70S network sharing capabilities, I was able to quickly satisfy that preference with my UPnP app. I'll confess, I'm a little disappointed with Marantz for missing the mark a little bit on the UX. I hold companies with a pedigree like theirs to a higher standard, and this time, that left me slightly deflated. That said, the sonic characteristics of the Stereo 70S are likely to please many listeners. With its ability to clearly present dialogue placed in a cinematic soundtrack without losing the depth and weight necessary to immerse you in a compelling on-screen narrative, its gently laid-back treble for easy listening to your favorite music, or the copious amounts of HDMI inputs, I've happily been proven wrong. There are likely millions of listeners in the target for which the Marantz Stereo 70 AV receiver is a bullseye. I hope that I've been able to articulate enough of my experience that individuals within that target are now able to confidently make an informed buying decision. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell. There's also a link in the description to our twice-weekly newsletter, and you might seriously consider subscribing to the Absolute Sound magazine. And remember, don't forget to make listening fun again.